with Amazon Fresh and Prime Now, we had banana alarms. So we had this banana alarm that would go off in the middle of the night, get up, go place emergency orders to make sure we never ran out of stock of bananas. The banana alarm became really, really important to us because
Blake Lawson, a data-driven leader in global retail operations and product development.
With experience scaling businesses and building teams.
With some of the world's most recognizable companies.
Including Target, Amazon, and SAP.
Retail has continued to change. Prime Now and Amazon Fresh were kind of at the forefront of how we figured out what that was going to look like. The secret name was Project Cherry. Amazon was trying to figure out how do we make the grocery business a profitable one. But what they were doing is they were losing those lower cost items that were basket builders. And so they called it crap, can't realize a profit. Grocery is a huge part of the customer experience. And so if you get customers shopping for groceries, they're going to buy other things on the platform as well.
Do you think the day of free returns is over?
On the wardrobe side, I was tasked to really try to figure out how to make that business profitable. During the pandemic, warehouses were so backlogged with returns and trucks, and Amazon was just having to write off truckloads of returns at that cost. And I think that's being passed on to consumers.
If your name is not Amazon, Kroger, Costco, or Target, how do you stay competitive?
I think those technologies will continue to help drive improvements, whether it's robots stocking the shelf to things happening behind the scenes to help inventory move through the stores, and emerging technology like AI and augmented reality. And so retailers really have to think about the future of their business because
Welcome to What the Tech, your gateway to business strategies and tech secrets shaping today's workplace. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with a former Amazonian, Blake Lawson, who has first-hand knowledge on what it's like to be behind the scenes at Amazon Fresh and Amazon Go. There's a lot I want to ask him about, like, what's the future of shopping? Where are we going with all that? Is it all going to be cashier-less from now on? Can other places implement this technology? Is it a boondoggle? And what all of this means as well for those businesses that are at retail. Should they be paying attention to this? Or is this just a big hype to do about nothing? So I want you to welcome to the podcast, Blake Lawson.
how's it going, Orlando? Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for coming in. We were just nerding out about coffee just before we started rolling. And it looks like we're two coffee nerds.
That we are. 2 peas in a pod.
or
pod.
Not in a K-pod either.
Exactly. We're going single origin somewhere in northern Africa,
You're a light roast. I'm more of a medium roast guy.
Yep.
And, I got started going down this rabbit hole during COVID, and I'm hooked on trying to make the perfect cappuccino or espresso. And I play around with a little bit of milk sometimes and I like maple syrup with mine. I've been messing around with that.
There we go.
Doing it straight, maybe a little bit more water. So I haven't quite come out with the perfect blend. I'm still chasing that, but I was hoping maybe you can help me along the way while we're going to talk about Amazon and products and groceries and shopping. But I know with that background you've got, maybe you can give me some pointers as we were talking about products.
Being a data person, I can break things down pretty fundamentally, but with espresso or coffee in general, it comes down to grind, temperature, and time. So it's really how fine is your grind, and that will increase your resistance because you want that to take longer to go through the puck of grounds you've got. You want to make sure that you've got the right temperature settings. That's going to depend on the region and the type of coffee that you have and how old it is. Coffee expires at a certain point in time. And then lastly, it's going to be time temperature. And you want to have that typically on an espresso machine, you should be pulling your shot like 30 seconds. And then, you're also looking at how fast the water's coming through and, the ratio of how much beans and water are coming out at the same time. So
the water is really important. I realized I've been playing around with different types of water. Like I love Voss water.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm playing with Deer Park water. I don't love Deer Park, but it's just more economical. Yeah. Especially as much espresso has been going through. But anywho, I know I didn't bring you on to talk about espresso, although we could probably spend a whole hour.
Yeah.
We could spend a whole episode just talking about that. Maybe we did. We do something on a live Instagram or a live TikTok about it.
I like. We'll just do a slice of us standing at our espresso machines.
Ooh, I like that. That'd be great. Ori, note that down somewhere. We do a live TikTok just side by side on on
Let's
pouring
do it.
out espresso
Yeah.
and tips
Yeah.
about that. I really like that. One of the things that, as I was getting ready to talk to you, I was looking at the places you've worked. You've worked at Target, you've worked at Amazon, and now you're at SAP. These are all great companies, household names. People know they're very recognizable. But one of the things about them that strikes me is that all of these three companies are all pushing the envelope of where they want to go with technology. And they're using technology to leverage data, to advance. Also, in the case of some of these, is to advance where they are in the marketplace. But more specifically, I want to know where you think technology sits in terms of its role when it comes to retail.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because there's so much happening in retail, and technology just undergirds kind of the dynamic environment that retail lives in. Customer behaviors change all the time, and retailers have to stay on the cutting edge of what their customers' wants and needs look like. And with the world of data that we live in, that's what helps us understand those behaviors. And so, all these companies have been so fortunate to work for have had their own flavor of how they want to approach, developing products, meeting their customers. And I think that's where, the data that I've worked with and that I've seen has really been grounded in customers at the end of the day. And then from there, it's how do we figure out how to do this economically and how do we scale? And so I think the data is going to continue to get more and more granular as we get more insights into customers' lives. It's going to get more and more granular with the breakthroughs in emerging technology like AI and, even augmented reality. I think will have a huge role in that. And there's a lot of different ways that that's going to be used and sliced across retail, because you have direct to consumer, you've got, business to customer and retail storefronts. And so that all manifests differently. And so retailers really have to have a unified data strategy and how they're thinking about the future of their business, because they're meeting customers in different channels. And yet customers want to have a singular experience across all of those channels. And that's kind of in the unique role I've had at SAP in helping define and craft the vision of what we're doing in retail stores specifically, because we want to unite that for customers so that they go in the store. They're like, hey, I'm recognized both from my purchase history I've had online, and I can have a catered experience in store, and vice versa. If I'm in store, my online experience can feel like I'm there and I'm getting the things that I need. And so there's a lot of questions that retailers are asking on how they do that. We're also looking behind the curtain in the back office and saying, like, how do we do this sustainably? How do we think about improving, our supply chain? How are we thinking about labor management and the workforce as that continues to shift? And so, data will just continue to undergird that, and having a real clear, unified data strategy is going to be kind of the winning piece for the foreseeable future. And that's going to enable, a lot of different areas within retailers, the retail experience in general.
I want to ask you more about the retail experience, simply because if we sit back and just put ourselves in the seat of the shopper or the consumer, you've got Walmart, you've got Amazon, right, and you've got Target. All three of them play as big retailers in the shopping experience. But the way you experience the stores at a Walmart, at Whole Foods, which is owned by Amazon Fresh or Amazon Go, Amazon Fresh or Amazon Go, and Kroger, they're very different. Now,
Yep.
they're all competing for these consumers, and they're all one way or another trying to bring them in with some type of low price, whether it's using eggs or milk or soda, and lure them in. And what I wanted to ask you, given that you worked in this retail space, experiences matter, but does that trump the pricing strategy when you talk about low prices? Is it all about the experience, or is it about the pricing that matters?
That's a great question. I would reference something called the Con Retail Matrix. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I have not. Enlighten me.
Yeah. It's a really great way, I think, to split down kind of the unique value proposition, because I think all three of those retailers fit in different quadrants. And so with the Con Retail Matrix, you have pricing as one quadrant. You have, I forget the axis that they're on, but then you have convenience in another quadrant, and then you have brand experience in another quadrant. So I would say Target fits in brand experience. Their value proposition is all about, hey, let's make this a great place to shop. We want to, have our our specific demographics who identify with these brands and this aesthetic shopping here. We'll have great prices, but you can also have this really great, brand experience at an affordable price. So they fit in the brand experience, in my opinion there. Yeah, there we go. Yep.
Thank you, Ori.
Amazon definitely goes down in the frictionless piece. It's convenience. How do we just continue to race to the bottom of how quickly and easily can we get this to customers? We're going to do this in 2 hours. You can do it with a single click. They're all about managing that. And then Walmart is driving all the way to the bottom on prices. How can we just offer the best selection at the lowest price possible? And so they're going to meet different customers based off where they sit in those quadrants. And so when it comes to pricing, ultimately, you have to run a sustainable business at scale to be a business, or else, you're going to be filing for bankruptcy. Right. And so they all have to find kind of that perfect balance between that. And they'll definitely start to overlap in some of those areas on pricing. Amazon has definitely started fighting with some of the pricing, or started fighting towards the bottom of pricing along with Walmart, and same with Target as well. Target's now doing a lot. They bought Shipt a few years ago, so they're trying to now encroach on Amazon with how they're looking at convenience. So at some point, those strategies begin to merge, but their true value proposition really sits on the top of that. And that's where customers see and resonate with that in a very unique way. And that's where they just, a good company is going to recognize that and continue to just build around that as their core pillar of the business while tackling those others. So like I said, pricing is going to be a big part of the strategy, but the other piece is going to be what drives the flywheel in their overall model.
Back in 2017, Amazon purchased Whole Foods. And
Yep.
I believe you were around Amazon in 2018, shortly after they acquired that. I wanted to ask you about, what was the sentiment? What's going on behind the scenes once that acquisition was completed? It was announced, and Amazon started essentially implementing the Amazon way into Whole Foods.
Yeah. So actually, I was with Amazon in 2015. I was on the operations side of Prime Now. So kind of give a little context there. Prime Now was Amazon's first 2-hour delivery, and it really focused on, a small assortment of household and grocery items that we could deliver in 1 to 2 hours within a major metro area. So I joined when we launched the 4th site, and I stayed within the Prime Now business as it merged into Amazon Fresh, launching over 60 buildings. We launched over 3 different multi-temp hubs. So I saw this business transform while we also acquired Amazon Fresh. So I had just moved to the retail side of Prime Now. So I was on the operations side, launching warehouses and traveling around the country and the world. And then I moved to the retail side of it, where I was owning more inventory management, purchasing, how that was lining up with our overall growth strategy on a retail front. And so when Whole Foods was announced, only a certain amount of people knew about this, but because the supply chain was so similar, and the selection that we were trying to bring onto Amazon's platform was a key part of that acquisition. Prime Now and Amazon Fresh were kind of at the forefront of how we figured out what that was going to look like on a procurement and an assortment level. And so we had the secret name was Project Cherry at the time. I wasn't on that team, but I had a lot of peers who were on that. I was on the peripheral side of that, on building out our hub and spoke network. And so I had to start looking at, hey, I know that these SKUs or these items from Whole Foods selection are going to start showing up. We're setting up our vendors to bring that into these single sites. While our vendor managers were figuring out what assortment to have, I was figuring out how we're going to bring this in and get this disseminated across, 40 different cities in the United States. And so it was a really interesting seat at the table, because, Amazon was trying to figure out, how do we make the grocery business a profitable one? I think in the early 2000s, like 2010s, in that time, Amazon was really trying to focus on assortment that drove revenue. But what they were doing is they were losing those lower cost items that were basket builders. And so they called it CRAP, can't realize a profit.
What a acronym, CRAP.
Right? Yeah. So, Prime Now was kind of the way to start thinking about, how do we realize a profit in a space that Amazon couldn't figure out before. And, grocery is a huge part of the customer experience. And so if you can get customers shopping for groceries, they're going to buy other things on the platform as well. And then you layer in the convenience of 2-hour delivery, it's another service that customers will just fall in love with. And so with Whole Foods, it was continuing to build out the selection. And so I think we all know the Amazon flywheel. We've seen the sketch that Jeff Bezos did on the napkin. At that point, we're adding selection at a better price, and we're going to just continue to drive that flywheel. And so Whole Foods was kind of a macro piece about the plan when it came to grocery and the grocery business within Amazon. So it was really cool to, see how we were going to do that. We made some big decisions to not integrate the networks on a supply chain level. But we had to just go upstream to the vendors and figure out what selection we wanted to pull from them directly into the Prime Now and Amazon Fresh business. And then we kind of just managed it there and at a category level, seeing, what was selling, what wasn't selling, what made sense. Well, in the peripheral way, we were also, in the periphery, we were also launching third-party delivery from Whole Foods directly. So I had a lot of friends and peers who were on that side of the business who were in the Whole Foods markets, figuring out how they're going to start setting up online orders and how to do all the delivery from Whole Foods. So it was kind of a two-pronged approach of how we brought Whole Foods into the platform. You could buy some stuff on Amazon. You could still have the Whole Foods experience online if you wanted. So it was really cool to kind of see how they were addressing the omni-channel experience that I was talking about earlier. Is customers could get that across Amazon or Whole Foods, and I think they just continue to bring those experiences closer and closer together over time, as they figured out how to bring supply chains together and how they start managing the costs across two different businesses.
You talk about cost, and one of the things that when I've gone to Whole Foods, and I love going to Whole Foods, I love the delivery even better, is that the shopping experience has changed. And
Yep.
I think that's directly attributed to what Amazon has brought into the game, which is the technology piece, more cashier-less type of experience. They've allowed you to do drop off packages, returns, which absolutely you want me to drink heavily tonight. You tell me there's a lot of returns heading back from customers, and that, oh my goodness, drives me bonkers.
I oversaw that part of the business for Prime Wardrobe. So returns are a huge part of the Amazon business right now that all retailers are trying to figure out in general, but for Amazon specifically, it's a primarily online experience. Those returns have to go back somewhere.
Do you think the day of free returns is over?
I do. Just from an economic perspective, on the wardrobe side, we really wanted to pride ourselves. Well, it's now try before you buy. I oversaw the global operations on the front for that, kind of the international expansion there. And so we were kind of the forefront of, how far can we push returns before it's no longer feasible. And so, I was tasked to really try and figure out how to make that business profitable on, a line item level. And so returns are expensive. The price of gas, you have the processing fees throughout the supply chain where it's getting dropped off. All those components come together. Then you get back to, how it's being processed in the warehouse, how much space that's taking in the warehouse. During the pandemic, I was on calls where, the warehouses were so backlogged with returns that returns were just sitting in trucks, and Amazon was just having to write off truckloads of returns they just couldn't process. So I think Amazon was kind of the canary in the coal mine when it came to, hey, we're gonna see how far this goes, and all these other retailers would try to do the same thing and catching up. And now everyone's in that place of they're realizing like, for every return item, that's a cost that's actualized without a profit to it. And so I really think that retailers are being forced to find ways to offset that cost, and I think that's being passed on to consumers. I think there's going to be different programs that will try to offset that cost, but the cost will show up to consumers in one way or another. Whether it's a membership fee, it's some sort of increased cost you're paying for shipping, whatever it might be. I do think the economics of returns are very, very challenging. I do think the one thing that we will see to help mitigate that cost is you'll see more proliferation of return nodes. You have happy returns in Staples, you have Amazon and Whole Foods. So
Kohl's.
You're just going to see, and Kohl's, exactly. You're going to see more of those types of things pop up, and then you're going to have their own incentives for you to go return there and put that friction point up closer to customers than to the business. But I think free returns are going to be a dwindling economic model for retailers.
And we're seeing it, we sell on the Amazon platform, we sell in the electronic space, and there's all sorts of fees that Amazon has implemented recently when it comes to both returns as well as inventory. They're just like what you're saying, they're trying to mitigate their cost. And, when I think about how Amazon changes the game, especially when you're talking about different things they'd like to get into. I want to jump into something and I was just thinking about how do I say this to somebody that's a former Amazon. I thought, oh, this would be a great way.
Me.
The Amazon of retail is Walmart, and Walmart in the retail space when it comes to groceries, they're the gorilla. They have approximately like 20% of the market share. Ori, do we have that graphic? There we go. They basically dominate. They're the Amazon of the retail, of the grocery space. So they have about 19.1 based on the 2022 analysis. And Whole Foods is towards the bottom. And if we were to put a chart up there of the e-commerce space, it'd be the other way around. Yep. Amazon has almost 40% of the e-commerce space, and Walmart's a far, far number 2. When you see something like that, and I get that I'm not telling you anything new, Amazon has a long way to climb. Whole Foods has a long way to climb, and collectively the Amazon properties that are in that umbrella of retail. What's the view like from when you were there and you know that Walmart's the gorilla? Do you have different tactics? Do you go with something new? Do you say, we're going to beat them at their own game with low prices, or we're going to outmaneuver them with technology?
Yeah. Like I said, I think I'm going to come back to the con retail matrix. I think the value proposition between Amazon and Walmart at its core is very, very different. They're obviously going to be down to try to win people over with price to a degree. But, as I mentioned earlier, Amazon's model is shifting towards grocery to figure out how do we build the basket for customers so that we have a basket starter. So, to use a great example with Amazon Fresh and Prime Now, we had banana alarms. Bananas were recognized as a high value item. Obviously, they're $1, to add to your basket, whatever it might be. But if you're out of stock on bananas, the likelihood of someone not converting to a sale is extremely high. And so we had this banana alarm that would go off in the middle of the night, and stock managers would have to get up, go place emergency purchase orders to make sure we never ran out of stock of bananas. Because if we did, we would see a noticeable drop in sales. And so going back to kind of the retail,
is that a key indicator? So bananas in your analysis or the Amazon analysis was the driver, or in some places I've heard, or maybe it'd be too old, it's putting a big huge stock of Pepsi out front, or something like that.
Well, I mean, Pepsi's, I would say in that situation, Pepsi's an add-on. You're hoping someone just adds that to the basket. And that's what those CP vendors are really hoping for, those sorts of end cap positioning. But customers are going in to buy groceries. And I was at Target when we did the rollout of P-Fresh, or their market. And that was a huge piece. Target realized if we can't offer groceries, then there's no reason for customers to come into our stores unless there's a household good that they need. So let's get kind of our core grocery selection so people can come in the store. And when I was there, I mean, this has been, almost 10 years now at Target, bananas were the number one selling item in grocery. So we realized people will come in just for bananas, and they're probably going to grab diapers, and they're probably going to grab milk, and they're probably going to grab, some paper towels along the way. They might have just ran across the street to Walmart to do that. And so Amazon has kind of the same play there when it comes to, we have to have a solid grocery offering for customers to step in the door and build a basket with us. And from there, we begin to build customer trust, and we begin to have that customer-centric flywheel growing to have customers coming back time and time again. And so that's where the banana alarm became really, really important to us, because, customers could rely on the fact that Amazon was always in stock with bananas. The minute we weren't, we broke that trust, and they might go to a Walmart, they might go down the street to the local grocery store or Kroger's. So I don't think Amazon is going to try and compete at that scale. Like I said, I'm not there now. I'm not on the leadership team and not privy to those conversations. But I think it's going to be the upper end of the funnel of how do we have a broad selection offering to bring customers in so we can increase spend across other categories. And that kind of dovetailed into kind of what I was doing with the Amazon fashion part with Prime Wardrobe is, that's a high margin category in general. How do we drive a business that adds value to the Prime membership base that also helps convert people that are at the top end of this funnel into increasing their spend across, Amazon as a business. So I think their big thing is they want to maintain that 40% market share on the e-commerce side, and grocery plays a small piece in helping that funnel continue to drive that part of the market. I think it's going to be less on the grocery side. Now, they'll always be competitive. they'll always find ways to make that an exciting experience. The just walk out technology, I think, is a way to do that. But I think kind of in a bit of a transition here, I think Amazon uses those spaces to actually just learn more about customer behaviors than it is actually driving a new type of business.
Indeed.
So,
Indeed. Because I recently, I think I saw somewhere where the just walk out technology at Amazon Fresh, the way it was implemented is on the way out, and they're going to smart carts.
Yep.
Which is an interesting thing because you think about behavior. The hardest thing to change is human behavior. So if you go into and I haven't been into one, but I know the people that tell me is like, it's a little weird to walk out with stuff that maybe feels a little like I'm stealing.
Yep.
And I also wonder, because I know Amazon's heavy into the data and analytics, that there may be some value in putting an item physically in a cart versus just putting it in a bag and heading out the door. And I'm wondering what you think about that, with that shift that Amazon Fresh has done with saying, hey, we're going to get rid of those other things that we had, the cameras and all that, and we're going to go to smart cart technology.
It's a great question, and feel free to stop me if I get down the road too far.
No, I want you to tell me your perspective.
This overlaps
there.
a lot with what I've been doing with SAP and how we're thinking about the retail store strategy. But to answer your behavior question, you're right. It's hard to change that behavior. Think about AirPods. We saw people with AirPods early on. We're like, that person looks dorky. Like, I'm never going to do that. And now it's the thing. If you don't have AirPods, you're kind of like on the out crowd. And so, there's this, growth curve around the early adopters and I'm totally blanking on this right now. The early adopters to kind of the mass adoption of that product. I think experiences like Just Walk Out will be here to stay. They'll just look differently in different footprints. And there's a lot of different vendors that are doing this. I know SAP is working with some specifically, and they're
is that the future, by the way? Is that where we're going? So if you're watching or you're listening to what you're saying, I gotta do something. Is that got to be part of my roadmap or my game plan moving forward?
I think it's going to be kind of similar to like how you manage your categories how you manage categories in a retail business. So like, I need to make sure that I always have a good mix here. It's going to be the same there. I think some businesses, they're going to have some level of Just Walk Out integrated into their business, whether it's one part of their store that's cordoned off, for like alcohol sales or, high value items, things like that. You have cameras, you have a way to track where the inventory is going at all times to the point of sale. And so, it can show up in that format to, hey, it's just a small bodega style store that, it's a small corner shop. There's a little bit of selection. And so the reason being now, and it's going to go down kind of the road, is why I think Amazon made this pivot. And I think why it's been so hard to adopt in the market is that the costs and the ROI on the equipment are so high.
Wow.
As we've done the modeling at SAP and we've looked at the different ways into this, it's a 5-year ROI before you start seeing,
wow. So this is not for the bodega. This is not for the bodega stores in New York City or in LA. So if your name is not Amazon or Kroger or Costco or Target, how do you stay competitive if these are the names that are looking at a 5-year ROI? Yeah,
no, it's true. I think it's going to be really challenging. And I think that's where, my personal bend is I love empowering, small growing mid-sized businesses or small and mid-sized growing businesses. And that's kind of where I've been trying to focus more of my time and energy, as I really enjoy taking these learnings there, but it's going to be a challenge. And I think that's where the experience is going to be so important to it. I think that's where that ground up movement of, I believe that small and mid-sized businesses, they're closer to their customers. They have to be. And so they're going to be more aware of how they meet their customers where they're at through, pop-ups, localized promotions, localized assortment, those sorts of things. They may not be able to afford the investment of that sort of technology unless they're bringing in some big capital to help support that sort of growth, or they have a very clear plan for growth to go that way long-term. And so, I think the play is going to be different there for your smaller bodegas and just in general. But I think for, the Amazons, the Walmarts, the Krogers, they're going to look at how they bring that technology in to just decrease the friction point and launch smaller format stores. And I also think it's already happening. This technology is being used in airports as well. It's being used in stadiums. And I know Starbucks is also using this technology as well. So it's just going to be this weird mishmash. I think there will be a separation of businesses and how those experiences are different. But I think that's, going to just be the tension that builds that's natural to, innovation. Small and mid-sized businesses will find ways to innovate and survive and drive value to their audiences, with those headwinds.
You said the word survive. And one of the things that's been very challenging for businesses that, again, don't have one of those marquee names is that the environment has become much more challenging, whether you are an online retailer or you are a physical retailer.
Yep.
And, costs for logistics and shipping have gone up. For some markets, labor has gone up. For others, it's raw goods going up. And, when you're an SMB, you don't have the resources that an Amazon has, a Kroger or Walmart has. And in the space of retail, the consolidation has really been a big wave, especially if you go back a couple of years. Kroger has been buying up stuff and other retailers, and the consolidation is real. I think I've read a statistic, Ori, do we have that, about the top 10 grocery chains? There we go. The top 10 grocery chains in America and their sales. And I saw a stat where if you were to take in 2022, all of those sales combined, you get somewhere around almost $900 billion, which represents a 24% increase. What I want to get at with this is that 24% increase over the previous year, where in grocery, the margins are slim, but man, that's a huge jump in sales. That couldn't have been all from a whole lot more people going in to buy eggs and bananas. Some of that had to be price increases, no? Or because people are feeling a pinch when they go shop. Yeah. Do you think that most of that 24% increase in sales had to be, or I'm just your opinion on where that 24% increase in sales? Because that's great if you're an investor. You're like, hey,
yep.
Yes.
Oh yeah, no, everyone loves seeing that growth. I mean, especially in a category like grocery, which should just kind of have an even growth with the population size, right? That's a big jump. Mm-hmm. The consumer price index has shown that inflation is a huge driver for those revenues right now. And I think that's where we're feeling that pressure point with inflation being what it is. That's being fed directly to us as consumers. And so, retailers will take that back. And I think that's where we're seeing some mounting pressure on, how are, retailers managing their margins in a way that's ethical. And I think those are questions that the retailers have to continue asking. But the reality is the world is changing on a minute by minute basis right now as things evolve. And so, I think at some point that will start to kind of go back to the normal growth curve. But I do think recently that's mostly driven by inflation. I believe those sorts of pressures are the things that drive innovation. So over time, I think we'll find new ways of bringing new technology in to help manage those costs, so retailers can continue to drive back that lower price point to bring customers back. So, whether it's, anything from blockchain to other technologies, I think that's where they'll try to bring that in to help drive those costs back down. But I think costs are going to be a challenge for the time being. I mean, my wife and I have seen a noticeable change to our grocery bill. Mm-hmm. And so it's just coming down to, consumers.
And, one of the things that I find interesting in all this is how this is all playing out. And much like Amazon is looking for how to compete, one of the interesting things that I've found is that we just recently got was an Aldi store. And I went there. It's a different footprint, different size. Yep. They're in between a convenience store and a supermarket, right? They're not quite a convenience store. But one of the things that grabbed my attention was their approach. It seemed very similar to what you talked about with regard to let's call them bread and butter issues. Ori, do we have that infographic? Look at this. This is what Aldi, and this is courtesy of Wall Street Journal using some Bureau of Labor statistics. Yep. Bread, $1.29 versus the national average of $1.97. Milk, yep. A half gallon of milk, $2.18 versus $3.96. And my favorite, eggs, $1.87 for a dozen versus $2. And one of the things that what I wanted, it's amazing that they're able to go down to those prices. But even more amazing is that they're using the same idea of, you called it the banana alarm, because they must see the same thing. Like, if we can have somebody come pick up some milk, maybe they grab up some wine, right? Or maybe they pick up some other item. It's amazing to see how this plays out at retail when you're trying to bring in new shoppers through the door.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's a brilliant play by Aldi right now, because when you look at, all the big retailers that haven't increased their prices, and then you also have 99-cent stores closing, which we're meeting a certain demographic of people, people that might have been shopping at Walmart and are getting priced out of that. And now you don't have 99-cent stores to get some of that stuff. Aldi's your next best bet. So it's a great way for them to start capturing some market share based off price point. So I think Aldi's really setting themselves up for a long-term play there. They're taking a short-term loss, I'm sure, or they're taking a short-term cut on their margins. But what they're going to get, hopefully, is that halo effect of customers coming back, because they're saying, hey, I went to Aldi for the first time, had a great experience. It was more affordable. I'll go back again. And Aldi's also had a pretty aggressive growth strategy over the last few years in the U.S. And so I think their store footprints are just becoming more accessible for customers as well.
Talk to me about costs, but it costs in a different way, not so much of the cost of eggs and milk and bread, right? But let's talk about cost to the operator, the store operator, right? Yep. It's because you can't run, like you said, you can't run a business at a loss. You certainly can't run a successful, sustainable business if that loss continues in perpetuity. So none of these retailers are really, at the end of the day, losing money. But if you're looking at all your line items, you're looking at the cost of goods itself, you're looking at the cost of people, you're looking at the real estate. How can savvy retailers, again, we're not named Amazon, Walmart, or Target, or Kroger, how do you look at these line items in trying to determine, here's where we need to be smart about our costs? How do retailers get smart about their costs?
That's a great question, and a lot of retailers are asking this question right now. To break it down, you've got different cost line items. Like you said, you have your fixed costs around real estate, you've got your variable costs around labor management and supply chain, and so I think within those cost centers, I think supply chain, there's so much disruption happening there, and I think we'll see more disruption, to varying degrees. And so I think it's going to be, how are you managing just-in-time delivery and your costs there versus, longer planning periods, and managing your safety stock and making sure that you are at least staying in stock and having, over those longer buying periods. I think that's going to be one way to start managing those costs and thinking about that. I do think blockchain will have a footprint there at some point. I think it's still just an emerging technology, but that will be a way for, every touch in supply chain to be recognized and the cost associated with it. And so with that clarity and that visibility, I think retailers will know what levers they can pull, and will probably spin up some new business models in the supply chain space. On the labor side of things, labor costs are just going to go up. I think there's a lot of movement happening, here in California on the fast food side of things. Labor rates went to $20 an hour. There's just a lot of pressure for, labor to catch up, especially with inflation being what it is. And so retailers are going to become more and more, how do I say it? I think some of them will see the value of human capital as humans, and they'll make decisions to build their businesses around, ethical. Well, ethical is maybe a harsh way to put it, but they'll build their labor pools around, hey, we see and value people as here. And you'll have other models that are saying, hey, we're just getting a race to the bottom, so we're going to run a skeleton crew just to get, meet our customer demand. And so, those models are going to show up, and how those costs are managed, that will continue to go up as well. And I think labor models will adjust. I think Amazon was one of the first players to really do this flex model. And I was there when we were helping roll that out in RFCs, where people could kind of pick and choose what shifts they wanted to work on. But it was also a way for us to say, hey, we're not going to have the same labor budget next week, and we need to cut our hours and think about that. But we want to make sure that we're not overstaffed. And so I think more models around that are going to come out. And one of the other areas too in SAP that we spend a lot of time talking about is how we manage tasks and automations in stores. And so I think technology will kind of augment some of those pieces, whether it's, robots stocking the shelf to, things happening behind the scenes to help inventory move through the stores. I think those technologies will continue to help drive, improvements as the costs of wages go up. And then I think from a fixed store footprint side, I mean, a lot of retailers are closing doors right now. Interest rates are staying high. So it's really affecting some of those long-term decisions for retailers. And so I think the ones that have been smart and are sitting on cash, they can make those decisions to say, hey, when the market's this way, we can make an investment forward. That'll help them expand their footprint, but they're going to be doing it cautiously. I'm not an economist. This is purely my own opinion, but I really think retailers are going to kind of just stand and watch and see what happens before they make any big calls on any more fixed cost investments.
Let me ask you, there's two things that I think about when I hear the word automation, and some people hear that and it panics them, especially if you are stocking shelves at Walmart or stocking shelves at Target. I know that you early in your career, you worked in that arena for Target. And so talk to me about the nervousness that people have when it comes to automation and back-end operations becoming more efficient, which in some ways, there are going to be folks that are going to be casualties of this as the operation becomes more efficient and more automated. Those jobs may go away. How do you have that conversation with your clients or folks that are coming to you about, hey, how do we address this?
Yeah, it's a great question because, businesses are built on human demands. And so we have to perpetuate that cycle by putting money in people's pockets to come buy from us. So I think when we look at that model, retailers who are asking that question, they're trying to find innovative ways to improve their costs, but they're also recognizing that there's other opportunities that are rising out of that. I am a believer that for every, job that's automated, there's more that are created further down the road. I think it's just, how is the workforce being upskilled and or being fungible enough to be able to move into different parts of the business? And I think there are some businesses and some retailers that are doing that well. They're looking at different opportunities or different roles that are popping up. And so I think, to answer your question, it's a really challenging one. There's not a clear-cut answer. I think some of the fears are legitimate for some people because, they see and are used to, a very specific type of job that they want to have, and they like the security of that. And so any change that comes is scary. And that's legitimate. And for retailers, they have to balance the, how do we improve our costs? Because if we don't, it's better for us to stay in business and employ some people than go out of business and employ no people. So you're not saying that that's how retailers are making all their decisions, but, I think that's part of how they're thinking about some of these big implementations and technology that's being used in the stores.
Is there a way in terms of saving money, if you're a business, you're looking at this and you're like, well, I'm down to the bone with labor. I can't have anybody in there because the technology to do cashier-less is too expensive. I'm down to the bone with labor. Is there a way for retailers to go direct with the producers of the goods so that maybe they're saving a couple of extra points? So maybe it's purchasing direct from farmers or purchasing direct from some of those folks that are making some of the packaged goods. I know that a lot of them, the big names, the Procter and Gamble's and the Crafts, those tend to go through distribution. But is there any opportunity or anything happening along those lines where maybe a trend is happening or other retailers are saying, hey, this is one way for us to reduce costs? Or is that just like, forget about it, you're going up against everything in the world and the way the thing works in terms of the supply chain for retail stores?
So you're speaking to retail stores specifically?
Yeah.
I'm not really too sure there. I think Whole Foods has done a good job when it comes to local procurement and how they've brought in local selection from different farms and from food vendors. But I'm not familiar with any specific models off the top of my head right now. And from the conversations I've had with retailers, in my role at SAP, that hasn't been too big of a conversation.
Okay, gotcha. So one of the things that I like to do as we do with most of our guests, there's a segment called Rapid Fire. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions. But before we go to the Rapid Fire, Ori, kick off the Rapid Fire segment. So I want you to tell me what hits your brain. There's no wrong, no right answer, just your answer. All right, here we go. Walmart versus Amazon.
Amazon.
Favorite social media platform?
Instagram, I guess. Yeah.
Insta.
I want to say X because I feel like I learn more on X, but Instagram is where I spend my most time.
All right. Favorite piece of tech?
Right now, I think AI. I mean, I'm going to just join the bandwagon at this point. I think there's a lot there.
Is there a particular one that you happen to like on the AI? Chatbot, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini?
I think ChatGPT. I think it unlocks, back to our earlier conversation with labor and how we're thinking about those things. I think it's a huge unlock for a lot of people in lower skilled labor.
Gotcha. First thing you reach for in the morning?
Cup of coffee.
Ding.
Can't start my day without it.
Exactly. Game-changing book.
Oh, that's a good question.
Or something you read that was a game changer for you. This
is going to be completely out of left field, but the Theology of the Poetic Mind, I'm totally this is coming out of left field, but
there we go.
The Theology of the Poetic Imagination. Fascinating book. I think it's really changed the way I look at the world and how I think about language.
Okay. Words matter. Language matters. Absolutely.
So much.
I like that one. I'm going to have to jot that one down. Lastly, a person you admire.
So I've been really fortunate to work with and be surrounded with some great people. It's hard to put my finger on one specific person. I think, I'd probably say Rob Dyrdek. I think his perspective on how he's used business to kind of build what he wants around his life, I have a lot of respect for.
Okay, Rob, there you go. There you go. If you're listening to this, Rob, big props to you. All right. Well, Blake, you've said a lot. We've talked a lot. Was there anything we missed or that you wanted to say as we wrap up?
No, I mean, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I nerd out in retail. I've really enjoyed my career here, and this is continuing. This is where I want to continue growing and developing as a leader, thought leader, as an executor and an operator. So, these conversations just fly by because, this is where I spend a lot of my time in the thought space. And, the things I'm scrolling on social media tend to be in this realm as well. So I've really enjoyed it. I think it's been thought-provoking. And I think some of the perspective and the questions you've brought, there's a lot there. Retail is continuing to change. I don't think there's a category that is changing as quickly as retail is. And it's just always continuing to reinvent itself. And that just makes it so exciting. And these conversations are just kind of a reminder of that. So I appreciate it.
No, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you sharing your valuable knowledge today. And if you are here listening to myself and Blake, I want to invite you to hit that subscribe button if you have found this valuable, because that helps us grow the show, grow the podcast, and to bring you information and do more research into some of these topics. And if you found a former Amazonian's perspective on this insightful, I invite you to go check out Nick Gazar's episode with myself and Dave. And we talked about why you should be profits obsessed. We touched a little bit on that with Blake about knowing your cost and zeroing on that. But Nick jumps into it from a different angle, from the advertising perspective, and why you should be profits obsessed if you sell products on Amazon. So go check that out anywhere where you consume your podcasts or your favorite video platform like YouTube. So I want to thank my guest, Blake, for joining me today, and I will see you next time.